Points to consider, options in speeding up your Battletech game. Now, one of the things with Battletech that is true of all war games, you start out small. You start out reasonable. A lance, maybe a couple of vehicles, a second lance, and next thing you know, the games get bigger and bigger and bigger. And over time, with access to miniatures and friends and playing, along with some elaborate terrain, you want to participate in big battles. So what I try to do is look ahead of me of the time that I'm going to play. Is this going to be kind of a standard Battletech weekly gaming session of 4 or 5 hours or so? Is this going to be a mega event all day? Or are we going to go play some other game and I'm going to try and sneak some Battletech in there and maybe get in like an hour and a half of Battletech? There are certain things to do to help speed the game along. The quicker the game, the more battle value. But there's also a duality of trying to create this narrative in Battletech, really trying to create something magical on the tabletop. And one of the ways we do this is through immersion. We looked at this last week with the idea of painting miniatures, terrain, battle effects. And anytime that you have to really pause the game to look something up or pause the game to take a break for something, and you can't eliminate it. It's going to happen. There's going to be 3 or 4 or 5 times you got to look things up or make a call on it. But trying to minimize that will lead to greater immersion, will lead to a quicker game, a better experience. The first thing that I would recommend is to go into the game as best as possible on an agreed battle value and agreeing ahead of time what units that you're going to take or not take. And I'm not talking about letting your opponents know, although you might, but coming up to the consensus of, look, we're going to do mechs, tanks, and infantry, but no air support. Or you can bring air support, you can bring artillery, or we're going to limit 2/3 of your force battle value has to be mechs, the rest can be tanks. And get an idea ahead of time of the list, so this way, as best you can sit down, ready to roll, literally ready to play on there. The other thing that I find helpful, and this was included in all the starter sets, and it's fantastic, but some slight modifications to it, is I call it the cheat sheets, right? The hard card stock that on the one side has the to hit modifiers and the other side hit locations. You're going to be utilizing these a lot. And I have to say, even from my perspective, someone that loves Battletech but plays a number of other war games on there, every now and then my brain short circuits, despite, 2 decades of playing Battletech, where my brain short circuits and I'm like, other than, 2 1s and 2 6s, I sometimes have to think about the location or think about the modifiers. There's just too much wargaming in my head. But having that sheet, or having those sheets, or having that printout is massively helpful. Massively helpful on there for when you have to look it up or something might happen a little bit out of the ordinary and you need to reference it. Dice. A lot of Battletech players will use dice, little dice, big dice, different colored dice, D20 dice, to keep track of how many hexes a mech has moved. So this way, when you're shooting, right away I can calculate, okay, did my mech run, walk, or stay stationary? 0 + 1 + 2 to the modifiers. Base pilot skill, so we're adding up on there. Range, and then I can look at the target I'm shooting at and make that movement adjustment on there, how many hexes they moved, and fire. Some people also will use a D20 to track heat. I just kind of mark it off with a pencil on there, or I've used a circular token. There are other systems. That is very helpful to have some way to track heat on there and to get a good visual reference of it. Pushing that out. The final piece depends on the available space. There's a big difference, and Battletech is great because you can scale up and play on a big war gaming table, or you can scale it down a little bit more intimate and play on a hex map on there, or a couple of hex maps put together. I find setting up the gaming table where it's like, okay, here's the action, here's the center piece that's in equal reach of all of us, all the players. Visually, they can all see it the best they can. But then to have a little piece of the table or another little table on the side, or sometimes a chair, that if we're at the gaming store utilizing a chair, the command center, right? The mech command center. If I can put out my character my character sheets, D&D, right? If I can put out my mech sheets, my lance sheets, the rules, the pool of dice on there, my pencil, and have that ready to go, I find that much easier in terms of a reference, having everything there to see, as opposed to having to flip through stuff or look stuff up. That's not always possible. I mean, sometimes literally the store gets so crowded and we got to get that Battletech in where we're like over in the corner playing on an overturned box, and my sheets are in my hand and I'm flipping through on there, and of course we're playing a big game, 15 mechs on each side. I try to alphabetize that things move out. These are ideal circumstances for speeding up the game, pushing the narrative, and this way doing the best that's possible to keep you engaged and focused in that Battletech universe.